My wife cheated on me right in our hotel, and I found out about it from a random guest. While I was rebuilding our family business, she and my best friend planned to take everything. But I don't give up that easily. I exposed their lies, outplayed them, and built an empire to make them regret every move they made. This is a story of betrayal, revenge, and victory, where I proved that the underdog can become the strongest. The icy winds of Montana howled outside the snowy trail as Jake Harper stood in the lobby, his calloused hands tracing the edge of a sleek wooden check-in desk he'd installed just months ago. At 38, Jake had poured his soul into reviving this crumbling family business, a rustic hotel nestled in the rugged mountains near Big Sky. 2 years back, it was a relic on the brink of collapse. Faded wallpaper peeling off the walls, a leaky roof dripping into chipped porcelain sinks, and online reviews so brutal they'd made his stomach churn. A one-star dump stuck in the 80s, one guest had written. Jake had left a cushy management gig in Seattle, cashed out his 401k, and returned home to save it. Now, with modern decor blending seamlessly with mountain charm, think reclaimed wood beams and panoramic windows framing snow-capped peaks. The place was finally turning heads. Bookings were up, the staff smiled more, and for the first time in a decade, the snowy trail was in the black. It was December 20th, 2025, 5 days before Christmas, and the lobby buzzed with holiday energy. Guests shuffled in with ski gear, their laughter mixing with the crackle of the stone fireplace. Jake had restored himself. He felt a rare swell of pride, until a gravelly voice shattered it. "Hey, buddy, you the owner?" A weathered man in a cowboy hat leaned against the counter, his gray mustache twitching as he chewed on a toothpick. Jake nodded, forcing a polite grin. "Yeah, that's me. Jake Harper. How can I help you?" The man squinted, sizing him up. "Just thought you should know. Saw your wife smooching some guy in the bar upstairs about 20 minutes ago. Figured you'd want to hear it from me, instead of the rumor mill." He tipped his hat and ambled off toward the exit, leaving Jake frozen in place. "My wife," Jake muttered, half laughing at the absurdity. Emily, his high school sweetheart turned partner of 10 years, wouldn't do that. Not here, not in their hotel. The guy was probably drunk, mistaking some tourist for her. Still, his gut twisted as he pictured her. Fiery red hair, that green scarf she always wore, the way her hazel eyes crinkled when she laughed. He shook it off and headed upstairs to prove the old man wrong. The bar on the second floor was quiet, just a few stragglers nursing beers under dim Edison bulbs. No Emily. No mystery man. Jake exhaled, feeling foolish, until his eyes landed on her phone, abandoned on the bar counter. She'd been here. She never went anywhere without it. Against his better judgment, he picked it up. The lock screen pin was still their anniversary, 0415, and it opened with a soft click. A text from Nate glowed on the screen. "Tonight, room 306. He's clueless as always." Jake's breath hitched. Nate Collins, his best friend since they were kids swapping baseball cards in the schoolyard. The guy who'd crashed on their couch after his last breakup, who'd stood beside Jake at his wedding. And room 306? The luxury suite Jake had designed as the crown jewel of the remodel, with its king-sized bed and private balcony overlooking the valley. His vision blurred as rage and disbelief collided in his chest. He scrolled up, each message a dagger. "Can't wait to get out of this dump with you. Once we sell, it's Cali beaches for life. He'll never see it coming." The timestamps stretched back months. Months of Jake slaving over spreadsheets and sawdust, while Emily and Nate plotted behind his back. His knees buckled, and he gripped the bar to steady himself. This wasn't just an affair. They were planning to take everything, his hotel, his life, and leave him in the dirt. The bartender, a college kid named Matt, glanced over. "You okay, boss?" Jake forced a nod, shoving the phone into his pocket. "Yeah, just need some air." He stumbled downstairs, the festive chatter of the lobby now a dull roar in his ears. Outside, the cold bit into his skin, but it couldn't numb the fire igniting inside him. Emily had smiled at him over breakfast that morning, kissed his cheek, asked about his day. Nate had clapped him on the shoulder last week, promising to help out with the business. All lies. Back in his office, a cramped room off the lobby littered with blueprints and coffee cups. Jake locked the door and sank into his chair. His parents, Tom and Linda, had handed him the snowy trail when they retired, trusting him to keep their legacy alive. He'd done more than that. He'd turned it into something they'd never dreamed of. And now, the two people he loved most were stabbing him in the back. He pulled out Emily's phone again, staring at the damning words. A part of him wanted to storm room 306, kick the door down, and confront them right then. But the smarter part, the part that had clawed this hotel back from ruin, whispered something else. Play it cool. Find out how deep this goes. Then make them pay. Jake leaned back, the gears in his mind already turning. He wasn't the type to break down or beg. He'd built this place with his own hands, and he'd be damned if he let them steal it. Whatever Emily and Nate were planning, he'd uncover it. And when he did, they'd regret ever underestimating him. Jake Harper barely slept that night. The clock on his desk ticked past 3 a.m. as he sat hunched over Emily's phone, the blue glow illuminating his haggard face. The snowy trail in was silent beyond his office walls, the cheerful bustle of the day replaced by an eerie stillness that matched the storm brewing inside him. Every message he read between Emily and Nate was a fresh cut. Plans to meet in secret, snide remarks about his endless tinkering with a hotel, and worst of all, a detailed scheme to sell the snowy trail out from under him. Once the deal's done, we're gone, Nate had written 2 weeks ago. New life, new us. Emily's reply. Can't wait to leave this cold hellhole behind. Jake's hands trembled as he set the phone down. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a heist. The hotel wasn't just his livelihood, it was his parents' legacy, his grandfather's dream carved out of the Montana wilderness in the 1960s. He'd sacrificed everything, his Seattle career, his savings, 2 years of sleepless nights, to make it thrive. And they thought they could snatch it away like it was nothing? By sunrise, his shock had hardened into resolve. Confronting them now would be satisfying, sure, barging into room 306 with fists flying. But it'd tip his hand. No, he needed evidence, leverage, a plan to bury them so deep they'd never climb out. He wiped the phone clean of his fingerprints, slipped it into a drawer, and headed home to the cabin he shared with Emily, a mile down the snow-dusted road. She was in the kitchen when he walked in, humming as she brewed coffee, her red hair tied back in a messy bun. "Morning, hon," she chirped, flashing that dimpled smile he used to adore. "Late night again?" "Yeah," Jake said, keeping his voice steady. Big shipment of furniture came in. Had to sort it out. He watched her pour him a mug, her movements casual, oblivious to the fact he'd seen her soul laid bare in those texts. It took every ounce of willpower not to slam the cup against the wall and demand answers. Instead, he sipped the coffee and smiled back. "You sleep okay?" "Like a baby," she said, leaning over to kiss his forehead. Her lips felt like ice now, a stranger's touch. As she turned away, Jake's mind raced. He had to play this smart, pretend everything was fine while he dug deeper. That afternoon, he called an old college buddy, Sam Rivera, a private investigator based in Bozeman. Sam didn't waste time with small talk. "What's up, Harper? You sound like hell." "I need you to look into something," Jake said, keeping his voice low as he stood in the hotel's maintenance shed, out of earshot. "Emily and Nate Collins." Discreetly. "I think they're screwing me over, literally and financially." Sam whistled. "Your wife and your best man? Damn, that's cold. Give me a week. I'll tail em, check their accounts, the works." "You sure about this?" "Dead sure," Jake replied, the words tasting bitter. While Sam got to work, Jake started his own reconnaissance. He logged into the hotel's security system, cameras he'd installed during the remodel, and pulled footage from a past month. There they were, Emily and Nate sneaking into room 306 late at night, laughing as they slipped through the back entrance like teenagers. He found bank statements too, buried in a locked filing cabinet Emily thought he'd never check. Thousands of dollars siphoned from the hotel's operating account, funneled into an offshore account under a shell company called Peak Ventures. Nate's sloppy handwriting was all over the paperwork. Sam's first report came 3 days later, on December 23rd. "You're not going to like this," he said over the phone. They'd been meeting a shady real estate guy, Victor Klein, in Billings. Looks like they're prepping to sell the snowy trail to a chain, Mountain Crest Resorts, for a quick $2 million. Klein's cuts $500,000, and your pal Nate's already spent some of the advance on a condo in San Diego. Emily's been playing the doting wife to keep you distracted. Jake's stomach churned. $2 million was a fraction of what the hotel was worth now, thanks to his upgrades. They weren't just betraying him, they were selling his blood and sweat for peanuts. There's more, Sam added. Your parents signed over partial ownership to Emily last year. She convinced them you were overworked and needed her to step up. They don't know what's really going on. That hit harder than the affair. Tom and Linda Harper, trusting and naive, had handed Emily the keys to ruin them all. Jake thanked Sam and hung up, staring out his office window at the snow falling thick and heavy. He could feel the noose tightening. Emily and Nate were moving fast, and he had to move faster. Over the next 2 days, he laid the groundwork. He met with a lawyer in town, a sharp woman named Tara Brooks, who specialized in business disputes. If they forged anything or misappropriated funds, we can nail them, she said, flipping through the bank records Jake had brought. But you'll need hard proof they're acting against your interest. Get me that, and I'll make sure they don't see a dime. Next, he contacted the hotel's accountant, a quiet guy named Greg who'd always liked Jake more than Nate. Keep an eye on the books, Jake told him. Flag anything weird, but don't tell Emily I asked. Greg nodded, no questions asked. Christmas Eve arrived, and the snowy trail hosted its annual guest party. Emily flitted around in a sparkly green dress, charming everyone, while Nate hovered near the bar, smirking like he owned the place. Jake played his part, laughing at their jokes, clinking glasses, even slow dancing with Emily under the twinkling lights. She pressed her cheek to his and whispered, "This is perfect, isn't it?" He nodded, swallowing the bile in his throat. Later, as the party wound down, he overheard Nate on a call outside. "Yeah, Victor, we're set for January 10th. Papers are ready." She's got Jake wrapped around her finger. Jake's blood ran cold. They were 3 weeks from pulling it off. Back in his office, he locked the door and pulled out a legal pad. He wasn't just going to stop them. He was going to turn their game against them. Step 1, secure the hotel. Step 2, expose their lies. Step 3, build something they couldn't touch. The snowy trail was his, and he'd fight tooth and nail to keep it. But if they wanted war, he'd give them one they'd never forget. Christmas morning dawned crisp and blindingly white over the snowy trail in, but Jake Harper felt none of the holiday warmth. He stood in the cabin's kitchen, mechanically stirring sugar into his coffee, while Emily bustled around, chattering about the party the night before. Everyone loved the new decor, she said, her voice bright as she sliced an orange. You really outdid yourself this year, Jake. Her green scarf dangled from the coat rack, a mocking reminder of the old man's words that had unraveled his world 5 days ago. He nodded absently, every muscle in his body coiled tight, waiting for the mask he'd worn since that night to slip. Then she dropped the bomb. Jake, I've got something to tell you. Emily turned from the counter, her hazel eyes wide and glistening, a nervous smile tugging at her lips. I'm pregnant. We're having a baby. She stepped closer, resting a hand on his arm as if testing the waters. It's yours, of course. I found out last week. The room tilted. Jake's coffee mug clattered onto the counter, brown liquid sloshing over the edge. Pregnant? His mind raced back through the last few months. Their intimacy had been sparse, strained by his late nights at the hotel and her girls' trips to Billings that he now knew were lies. He stared at her, searching for the truth in that practiced expression. Was this another play, a new layer to her scheme with Nate? Or was it real? Say something, she urged, her voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. That's incredible, he managed, forcing a grin. A baby. Wow. He pulled her into a hug, her familiar lavender scent clashing with the bile rising in his throat. She melted against him, oblivious to the storm raging in his head. A baby, his baby, changed everything. If it was true, he wasn't just fighting for the hotel anymore. He was fighting for a future he hadn't even known he'd have. But doubt gnawed at him. That afternoon, while Emily napped, he called Sam Rivera, his PI. She says she's pregnant. Jake whispered into the phone, pacing the snowy porch. Claims it's mine. Can you dig into her medical records? I need to know if she's lying. Sam's voice crackled through the line. Tricky, but I'll see what I can do. Meantime, got more dirt. Nate's meeting that real estate shark, Victor Klein, again tomorrow. They're pushing the sale timeline up. You got maybe 2 weeks before they file the papers. Jake hung up, his breath fogging in the frigid air. 2 weeks. He'd been gathering ammo, security footage, bank records, Nate's forged signatures. But this pregnancy threw a wrench into his plans. If the kid was his, destroying Emily outright meant dragging his own flesh and blood into the fallout. He needed certainty, and fast. By New Year's Eve, Sam delivered. Got a buddy who owes me a favor at a clinic in Billings, he said over a scratchy call. Emily saw an OB/GYN 3 weeks ago. She's 8 weeks along. I can't get a paternity test without a sample, but timeline-wise, it could be yours or Nate's. Your call, man. Jake's got twisted. 8 weeks. That tracked with a rare night in late October, when he'd come home exhausted from a supplier meeting, and Emily had been unusually affectionate, probably to keep him off her trail. But it also lined up with her secret trips to Nate. He booked a private DNA test through Tara Brooks, his lawyer, using a hairbrush Emily left in the bathroom. Results would take a week. Until then, he'd play along. At the hotel's New Year's bash, Jake kept up the charade. Emily glowed in a silver dress, her hand resting lightly on her still flat stomach as she mingled with guests. Nate swaggered around, tossing back whiskey and slapping Jake on the back like nothing had changed. Big year ahead, huh, buddy, he said, grinning. Jake smiled back, imagining how that grin would shatter when the truth came out. The test results hit his inbox on January 6th, a cold, gray morning. He opened the email alone in his office, heart pounding. 99.9% probability of paternity, it read. The baby was his. Relief flooded him, followed by a fresh wave of fury. Emily wasn't just cheating. She was using his child as a pawn. He dug deeper into Sam's latest findings. A text from her to Nate, dated 2 days ago. Once he knows about the baby, he'll sign anything to protect the family. We're golden. Jake's jaw clenched. She thought she could manipulate him into handing over the snowy trail, his legacy, his pride, for a future she planned to steal anyway. But she'd miscalculated. He wasn't the pushover she assumed. That night, he sat her down at the cabin. A baby's a big deal, he said, voice soft, eyes locked on hers. We should start planning. House, finances, all of it. I want us to be secure. Emily beamed, leaning into him. You're right. I've been thinking the same thing. Maybe we could free up some cash from the hotel? For the baby's sake. There it was, the bait. Sure, he said, hiding the steel in his tone. Let's talk numbers tomorrow. She nodded, satisfied, while Jake's mind shifted gears. He'd let her think she was winning, all while tightening the noose. Sam called the next day with a bombshell. Found something big. Nate's been skimming cash through Peak Ventures, but he's also got a side deal with Klein, selling the Snowy Trails land separately to a developer. Emily doesn't even know. He's double-crossing her too. Jake almost laughed. Nate's greed was his downfall and Emily's blind spot. He met Tara that afternoon, laying out the new evidence. Can we use this? He asked, sliding a folder across her desk. Oh yeah, she said, eyes gleaming. Nate's cooked, and Emily's complicity ties her to it. We'll lock the hotel down, transfer full ownership to you legally, before they can blink. Then we expose them. Jake nodded, a grim smile tugging at his lips. The baby complicated things, but it also sharpened his focus. He wouldn't just save the Snowy Trail. He'd protect his kid from the mess Emily and Nate had made. Step 1 was securing his assets. Step 2 was watching their house of cards collapse. And Step 3? He glanced out the window at a faded for sale sign on the old Starry Ridge Inn, a derelict property 5 miles away. A new idea sparked. If they wanted to play dirty, he'd play smarter and build something they could never touch. January 9th, 2025, hit Montana like a freight train. Bitter winds rattling the windows of the Snowy Trail in as Jake Harper finalized his counterstrike. The past week had been a blur of late-night strategy sessions with Tara Brooks, his lawyer, and quiet moves to lock down the hotel's future. He'd played the doting husband flawlessly, nodding along as Emily prattled about nursery colors and securing their family's finances, all while knowing she was dangling their unborn child like bait to reel him into her and Nate's trap. The sail to Mountain Crest Resorts was set for tomorrow, January 10th, according to Sam's latest intel. Jake had one day to turn their scheme to ashes. He started with a legal kill shot. Tara had worked her magic, exploiting a clause in the hotel's ownership papers. Emily's partial stake, signed over by Jake's parents, was void if she acted against the business's interests. The forged documents Nate had cooked up through Peak Ventures, siphoning funds and prepping the sale, were Exhibit A. By 9 a.m., Tara filed an emergency injunction with a judge in Bozeman, freezing all transactions tied to the Snowy Trail. "They won't know what hit em," she'd said, smirking as she handed Jake the court-stamped papers. Next came the public gut punch. Jake had Greg, the accountant, compile a damning report. Every cent Nate had stolen, every shady transfer to the offshore account, time-stamped and traced. Sam's PI work added the cherry on top. Photos of Nate meeting Victor Klein in a dingy Billings diner, plus a recorded call where Nate bragged about screwing over the wife too by selling the land separately to a developer for an extra $1 million. Jake anonymized the evidence and handed it to a local blogger, Casey Mills, who ran a popular Montana tourism site. "Post it at noon," he told her. "Make it big." Casey's eyes widened at the scoop. "This'll blow up the valley," she said, already typing. At 11 a.m., Jake called a staff meeting in the Snowy Trail's lobby. Emily and Nate strutted in, oblivious, her in a flowy maternity top, him in a leather jacket that screamed midlife crisis. The employees, housekeepers, bartenders, the front desk crew gathered, sensing something off. Jake stood by the fireplace, hands in his pockets, and started slow. "I've got news," he said, voice steady. "The hotel's safe now. Took some work, but we're not selling." Emily's smile faltered. "What do you mean not selling?" she asked, stepping forward. Nate shot her a look, then turned to Jake. "Buddy, what's this about?" Jake pulled out the injunction papers and tossed them on the check-in desk. "It's about you two trying to rob me blind. Forging docs, stealing cash, planning to ditch this place, and me, for a beach house in Cali." Gasps rippled through the staff. Emily's face drained of color. Nate's jaw tightened. "That's insane," he sputtered. "You've lost it, Harper." "Check your phones," Jake said coolly. Right on cue, Casey's post went live. Phones buzzed as staff scrolled, eyes widening at the screenshots, bank records, and Nate's smug voice on audio. "He's clueless," Nate had laughed in the recording. "And she thinks she's getting half." Emily whirled on him. "What the hell does that mean?" Nate stammered, but the damage was done. The staff glared, some muttering curses. Sarah, the head housekeeper who'd been with the Harpers for 15 years, spat at Nate's feet. "You're scum." Jake let the chaos unfold, then dropped his final blow. "Court's got it now. Hotel's mine fully. You're out." Emily lunged at him, tears streaking her mascara. "You can't do this. I'm carrying your kid." Jake met her gaze, unyielding. "And I'll fight for that kid. But you're done here." Security, two burly guys Jake had hired that morning, escorted them out as Nate shouted threats and Emily sobbed. By evening, the story was everywhere. Local news, social media, even a call from a Denver paper. Mountain Crest pulled out of the deal, spooked by the scandal, and Victor Klein vanished, likely dodging Nate's wrath. Jake's parents, Tom and Linda, showed up at the cabin, shell-shocked. "We didn't know," Linda whispered, clutching Tom's arm. "She fooled us too." Jake hugged them, but his focus was elsewhere. That night, he drove to the Starry Ridge Inn, a rundown heap he'd eyed for weeks. The "for sale" sign swayed in the wind, and he called the realtor on the spot. "I want it," he said. "Cash offer, quick close." His savings were battered, but he'd rebuild, bigger, better, untouchable. By January 15th, it was his. He walked the empty lobby, boots echoing on cracked tile, and saw potential, eco-friendly suites, a spa, views that'd outshine the Snowy Trail. Meanwhile, the Snowy Trail tanked under Nate and Emily's brief reign. Guests canceled, reviews plummeted, dirty rooms, rude staff. One read, and debts piled up. Nate faced fraud charges from terrace filings. Emily's name was mud in Big Sky. Jake didn't gloat, he just worked. The Starry Ridge's grand opening came 3 months later. On April 10th, locals packed the place, raving about the solar panels, the farm-to-table restaurant, the serenity. The snowy trail slashed rates to survive, a shadow of what Jake had built. One evening, as he locked up the Starry Ridge, his phone buzzed. A text from Sam. Nate skipped town. Emily's begging for a deal, offering to testify against him. Jake didn't reply. Let them claw at each other. He'd won, not with fists or screams, but with cold, hard moves. The snowy trail was his past. The Starry Ridge was his future. And tomorrow, he'd meet Tara to start custody proceedings. Emily could scheme all she wanted. His kid would grow up knowing who'd fought for them. April 25, 2025, shimmered with the promise of spring in Montana's Big Sky country. Jake Harper stood in the lobby of the Starry Ridge Inn, his new pride and joy, watching sunlight spill through floor-to-ceiling windows onto polished oak floors. The air carried the scent of fresh coffee from the cafe and pine drifting in from the open doors, a stark contrast to the chaos that had defined his life just months ago. At 38, he turned betrayal into a victory, not with vengeance's heat, but with the steady burn of resilience. Today was a milestone, the Regional Hospitality Awards in Bozeman, where the Starry Ridge was up for Best New Boutique Hotel. But first, he had a courtroom to face. The custody hearing for his son Liam, born 2 weeks earlier on April 11th, loomed at 10 a.m. Emily had fought dirty. Tears in the judge's chambers, claimed she'd been misled by Nate. But Jake's evidence was ironclad. Tara Brooks laid out Emily's texts plotting to use the baby as leverage, her role in the Snowy Trail's financial ruin, the public scandal that had stripped her credibility. Jake testified calmly, voice steady, as he described finding her phone that December night, the months of deception, and his determination to protect Liam from her chaos. I built the Starry Ridge for him, he'd said, hands clasped. A stable future, not a pawn in her games. The judge's ruling came fast. Full custody to Jake, supervised visits for Emily pending therapy and restitution for her part in the fraud. She'd sat there, red-eyed and silent, as the gavel fell. Jake didn't linger to watch her leave. He had a hotel to run and a son to pick up from his parents' place. Tom and Linda, still reeling from their blind trust in Emily, had stepped up, doting on Liam like the grandparents they'd always wanted to be. "We're so sorry, son," Tom had said last week, voice thick. "We should have seen her for what she was." Jake just hugged him. The past was done. He was looking forward. By 6 p.m., he was in Bozeman, Liam nestled in a carrier against his chest, as the awards ceremony kicked off. The Starry Ridge's staff, many ex-Snowy Trail loyalists who jumped ship, filled a table near the stage, buzzing with nervous excitement. When the announcer called out Starry Ridge in as the winner, the room erupted. Jake walked up, Liam cooing softly, and took the glass trophy with a nod. "This is for my team," he said into the mic, voice carrying over the applause. "And for anyone who's been knocked down but got back up. Sometimes the best thing you can build comes from what others tried to break." He caught his parents' eyes in the back, Tom's proud nod, Linda's teary smile. Emily wasn't there, nor was Nate, who'd fled to Idaho after the fraud charges stuck, leaving Emily to face the fallout alone. Word was she'd sold her jewelry to cover legal fees, living in a rented trailer on the edge of town. The Snowy Trail had been foreclosed on in March, bought cheap by a developer who'd turn it into condos. Jake felt a pang for the old place, his family's roots, but he'd let it go. His legacy was here now, in the Starry Ridge. After the ceremony, a Rocky Mountain travel editor cornered him. "We're naming you Innovator of the Year," she said, scribbling notes. "From saving one hotel to building another in 3 months. That's a hell of a story." Jake shrugged, adjusting Liam's tiny hat. "Just did what I had to." The issue would hit stands next month, spotlighting the Starry Ridge's eco-design and Jake's rise, with a sidebar on the Snowy Trail's collapse, a cautionary tale of mismanagement and greed. Back at the hotel that night, Jake toasted his team with sparkling cider. Liam's presence kept it alcohol-free. Laughter filled the lobby as staff swapped stories of the grand opening, the guests who'd raved about the sauna, the 5-star reviews piling up online. Occupancy was at 90%. Inquiries poured in from Denver tour operators, and a national chain had even floated a partnership. Jake declined. He'd never sell again. Later, alone in his office, a cozy nook overlooking the valley, he rocked Liam's bassinet with one foot, reviewing the day. The awards trophy gleamed on his desk, but it was the photo beside it that held his gaze. Him and Liam, taken by Linda the day they'd brought him home. Emily's shadow lingered, her last text, a plea to talk, sat unanswered. But Jake felt no guilt. She'd made her choices. He'd made his. The snowy trail's end had stung, but its loss birthed something better. Nate's arrest warrant was out, caught trying to scam a bar owner in Boise, and Emily's social circle had evaporated. Her charm no match for the truth. Justice wasn't loud or vengeful, it was quiet, inevitable, like the snow melt feeding the rivers outside. Jake stepped onto the Starry Ridge's balcony, Liam in his arms, and breathed in the crisp night air. Below, guests mingled by a fire pit, their voices a soft hum against the mountain silence. He'd lost a wife, a friend, a piece of his past, but he'd gained a son, a purpose, a life he'd forged with his own hands. "We're okay, little man," he murmured, kissing Liam's forehead. Better than okay. The road had been brutal, nights of doubt, days of grit, but standing here, he felt free. Not from anger or pain, those had faded, but from needing anyone else to define his worth. The Starry Ridge wasn't just a hotel. It was proof he could rise above, build anew, and thrive. As the stars blinked over the ridge, Jake smiled. He'd won, not by tearing others down, but by lifting himself up, and that was the sweetest victory of all.